It's that time. It is the last episode of our podcast housekeeping series. So when you're done with your work from today, your show will be fully reviewed and ready for you to move in to this next season. Move into Q4 knowing your show is doing the job it needs to do, and you might have a little bit of a to-do list. Some things you want to change. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. As we wrap up the podcast housekeeping series, I want us to talk about some of our process, some format stuff, because this is the stuff that's most likely to remain on your to-do list for a while, because some of it may be feeling things out, and more often than not, it's not going to be like a new podcast cover is like there's an old one and there's a new one. And some of these things you may need to test, you may need to experiment with, because some of it is your own experiential process, like what is working for you, because that's really the only thing that comes out of it. It's not impacting the actual episode, but it is impacting your ability to get the episode done. And when we talk about a podcast, when we talk about a weekly podcast, when we talk about a podcast that comes out over and over and over again, and it's not seasonal in any way, like this show, like your show, there are times where we're less available than others, right? And so we need this process to be easy on us, or at least as easy as it can be. So first and foremost, I want to talk about signs that your episode process maybe needs your eyeballs, maybe needs a review. And let me start by saying, if you're feeling like it just is taking forever, I want you to time track your podcast process, especially if you are somebody DIYing it front to back, meaning you build the strategy, you build the plan, you prep the episodes, you record the episodes, you edit the episodes, you create the show notes for the episode. Like when you're doing everything from ideation to marketing the episode post-release, when that's all you by your lonesome, time track, time track, time track, time track, time track. Because it's a lot of time, and it will be easier for you to see the value in getting some support when you see how much time you're spending on each of those tasks. And what's double great about this is it will tell you the things you need to outsource first. So what are the part of your processes where you're losing large amounts of time that are not really worth it, right? So time tracking, time tracking, time tracking. Even if you are somebody working with a production team like ours, where all you're doing is recording, and then we work together on strategy, and my team handles all of the actual production stuff, and then you have all the assets and all you got to do is share, I still encourage you to track your time, because it will let you know where you can better optimize it, where you can better batch it, or where you maybe need to make changes. I want to give you some examples. One of the things I will often do is record or track my time when I'm recording, because I have found that I get distracted. I think I'm recording, but I'm not actually recording. And so when I track my time, and I turn my time tracker on when I start, and I don't turn it off until I'm done, and I recorded a 15-minute episode, but it took me 45 minutes to do it, I know there's a problem. Either I'm getting distracted, or I'm not doing a good enough job planning the episode so that I can hop in, say what I need to say, and bounce. And so there is data there. So no matter what, track your time. I'm not saying this has to be all the time. I couldn't. I genuinely couldn't. But it is something I do regularly. So now we're at the end of August. How about for September and those 4 episodes that you're going to release, you track your time. Not forever, just for September. And that gives you a good swath. You got 4 episodes. You've got some nuance in there around, what each episode is, or you're doing them on different days or whatever that is. But it gives you some data to identify maybe what could be going weird. And again, I don't do this all the time. I do this maybe once a year. And I don't necessarily do the time tracking thing every year. It has become, now that I'm a lot of years into this, it has become something I do when I'm feeling off. If it's helpful for you because you've never done it before, I would recommend sort of making this a regular thing. Make it a part of this podcast housekeeping series. In August, we're going to do this together. We're going to go through these 4 episodes, track your time in August so that you can get an idea, get a sense of where you might be losing minutes or hours in some cases. All right. All right. I want us to talk about some of the things I look at when I audit an episode that are, yes, process, but they're questions we need answered so that we know our process is doing what it needs to be do. And so, first and foremost, I want you to understand the job of each episode of your show. If you don't know what the job of that episode is, then maybe it's not time to release that episode. So what do I mean by job? Every episode is built to sell your services, sell your programs, whatever that might be, right? Because that's the job of your show. But each episode has to do different things to get to that job of selling that your show does. And so some of the jobs your individual episodes will have are social proof. That's case study episodes, right? That's where you're telling the story of your work. There is what I lovingly call indoctrination, and that is where you're getting your listener on board with the way you do things. And that's not through manipulation, it's through education. It is explaining the concept. It is making sense of the jargon that people in your space maybe use a lot in their content so that they can feel smart. It's a great way to build trust. And I know indoctrination sounds scary. It sounds like I'm doing something, unreputable. But the reality is that is what your training and your education content should be doing. It should be indoctrinating them, because by educating them, by training them, you are giving them the understanding they need to have to be your best client and get their best results. And so that's what I mean by indoctrination. So we've got social proof, we've got indoctrination. We also need sales episodes. So these are things like our audio sales pages. These are things where we're really breaking down the work we do and why now is the time for them to do it. So these are your objection busting kind of content. This is your audio sales pages. These are your episodes where they're really going, I know I'm the right fit for this. I know this is the right problem to solve, the right solution for my problem. And I'm ready to do what's next. And every episode isn't going to be any one of these things, right? If I had a whole series, a whole show, an entire podcast that was only indoctrination content, it wouldn't convert. Because no matter how much I get you on board, I never tell you what to do next. I never give you a next step that is purchasing, that is getting the solution you want. The same is true as case studies. And on the flip side, if all I give you is conversion episodes, if all I give you is straight sales content, if this was a whole freaking show of audio sales pages, it would be the worst. Nobody would listen to that. We're never building the trust we need to build for that conversion episode to work. So when you're sitting down to plan your episodes, you need to know what is the job of that episode. And the reason for that is because that's how we control the scope. That's how we know how much we need to tell you in this episode. So we talk a lot about episodes needing to be as long or as short as they need to be to make the point. And so often I find that experts, especially service providers and coaches and consultants who care about their client, care about the work they're doing, just keep making their episodes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because they want to tell you everything. They want you to understand top to bottom, front to back, inside, outside, all of it. But for those of us who don't have your expertise, for those of us who don't yet know all the things you know, that's incredibly overwhelming. And so what you need to do is figure out what I need to know in the scope of the job this episode is doing. That way, you're giving me the right amount of information that I need right now. That means more information in your indoctrination-y kind of episodes than is going to be in your conversion episodes. That's even going to be in your case study episodes because my case study episodes are experiential. They're less about the work and more about the person's experience of the work, what happened, what the process was, what it looked like. Why we did things is more of that indoctrination stuff. Do you see how these are kind of working together? And when you know the job, it helps inform all the other things. That's what I want you to understand. This is the stuff you should be doing at your strategy phase, at your planning phase. The other thing I want you to be doing is looking at real conversations you're having. Because if I know I need to have a conversion episode here because the program is going to be closing for enrollment the week after this episode goes out, I don't want to make up the thing you need to know to convert. You know where I'm going to go? I'm going to go to my sales calls. I'm going to go to my objections. I want to go to the place where somebody who's also sitting in that decision already told me how they're thinking about it. So maybe that's your inquiry forms. Maybe that's the applications to work with you. Again, sales calls, objections. Those are the things I want to be talking about. When we start making up what we think they need to know, we're almost always wrong. And the reality is you have all of that information right now. That's why so often when I sit down with clients on our quarterly strategy calls, which I'll be doing as we roll into September, I'm going to be asking everyone, what's been coming up on sales calls lately? What's been coming up in your client conversations lately? These patterns, these requests, these objections, this language is going to outperform what ChatGPT or Claude or whatever other AI tool or whatever other generic template that you opted into of content ideas. It's going to outperform them every time. Every single time. You know why? Because that is where we get the content that gets them nodding along, that allows themselves to see themselves in what we're talking about. Because, yes, we are all special snowflakes and individuals, but we generally have more in common than we realize. And this is one of my favorite things to remind myself of whenever I need to raise my hand and ask a question that feels stupid. If I have this question, someone else in this room does too, and they're just too embarrassed to raise their hand. I do not feel such shame, so I'm going to do us both a favor. How many times in the course of your whole life, think back to school, think back at conferences, mastermind retreats, have you had someone ask a question and you take a deep sigh of relief? It's because we're all more alike than we realize. And so choosing ideas, focusing your content on real questions and real language coming from the people you want to be working with is always going to put you ahead. In this same frame, I want you to stop forcing content into titles and instead create content from these ideas, from these conversations, and then title them based on what's there. And again, be using their language as often as possible. Yes, we need to be making sure titles work for robots because we've got search engines and we've got AI platforms and we've got all these things. But it doesn't matter how many things serve your episode to your very perfect prospect and listener if when they see it, they're like, what does that even mean? Or worse, that sounds boring. right? And so balance that. Plan the episode, create the episode, then worry about the title, then worry about everything else. The other thing I want you to look at as you're auditing is your format. Have you been leaning really heavy into solos and you'd like to add more client case studies or expert interviews? On the flip side, and this is the version of this I see most often, have you been leaning so hard into interviews that it's been a while since you sat and just talked to your audience? Talk to your leads. Talk to the people who want to be working with you. Now, I absolutely have clients who have 100% interview-based shows. And that is strategic because they have featured guests who are inside of the companies they want to be partnering with, who they want to be working with. They have brought on people who they want to extend relationships with because they have access to event stages, or they have access to other audiences, or they have access to, like I said, companies, whatever it is. But there's a strategy even in the guests. Now, if you are having guests because it feels easier, or you have been recording solo because it feels easier and there's no other reason, let's look at it. Let's make sure that the job of the episode matches the format of the episode. That means finding the sort of center of that Venn diagram. And this is, honestly, it is why I do solo so often. Because for me, you and I sitting here talking through this stuff, I find it to be the most effective. I also find it the most pleasant to produce. I like this. I get excited when we have guests on, and I love sharing their stories with you. And one of the things that I'm looking at as I go through this month is, have I featured enough guests? Have I regularly brought on clients enough so that you can hear the other side of this, right? So that you can hear their experience. You can hear about our process. And not just from me, but from somebody who's been through it. And so that's something I'm going to be looking at, because the center of my Venn diagram is looking a little skinny when it comes to case studies and getting to hear that behind the scenes social proof kind of stuff. All right. So we've talked about pulling ideas from real conversations, understanding the job of the episodes, planning. I want to get really processy here for a second. I'm jumping around a little bit, but this is a question I get a lot, and I feel like I've done an episode just about this by itself, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look, and if I have, I'll include it in the show notes, and if not, we'll do one soon. But there's not a right way to get your episode ready. I am not a scripter. I have a really hard time with scripts. I get so in my head about like missing a comma that I lose all sense of charm and wonder and personality. And let's pretend that that's an important part of this, okay? On the flip side, I have episodes where that's more necessary. I need to have everything in front of me so that I don't miss anything. Those are the audio sales pages, because there's more stuff that I need to get across. If you're feeling like it's getting hard to sit down and record, try scripting more. Now, that doesn't mean the only options is like no script or a script. I probably swing wildly in that gray area, if I'm being honest. Sometimes I have sort of a working title, which is like, you remember when we were in elementary school and we learned about thesis statements? That's kind of what that working title is, right? This is the thing we're talking about. This is the theme of this episode. And then like 3 bullet points, so like I can make sure I make those 3 points. When I do these episodes, I have a list of things I make sure I want to talk about. And I sometimes jump around that list, as evidenced by today. And sometimes I'm really much more structured. Honestly, the earlier episodes in this series are a great example of that, because we move through things very strategically. This one, where we start talking about process and format and sort of all of those other pieces, and also this of the audit, I jump around a bit more because I just sort of have the laundry list of things I want to talk about. Figure out what works for you. When I'm struggling to record, my outline is much heavier than that. It's not a full script, but I'll have points under my points. Like, I need to touch on these 3 things. I need to get these 3 ideas across. And here's what I want to make sure I cover inside of those ideas. And that's probably, I don't know, 40-ish% of the time. I'd say probably 50% of the time it's working title, 3 bullet points. And then there's that 10% of the time where it's almost a script. I don't ever go all the way script, but I will have things I want to say. I will have scripted sections in those bullet point of my takeaways. And that's about as scripty as I get. If what's working right now is no longer working, try something else. And this is what I mean about this being the thing that's the to-do list that you're going to be trying out as you move through these next couple of months. And give yourself some time. But the biggest thing I want you to know here is what works now might not work later. What's worked before might not work now, but might work again later. Not all things are for all seasons, essentially. So choose what's working for you in this episode. What doesn't work, set aside. What is working, double down on. But there's no mythical, magical right way. And there's no wrong way. It's whatever works for you. All right? Sort of odds and ends stuff before we wrap up. The biggest thing I can say about process is batch by task, not by episode. So when I'm sitting down and I know I'm going to record 4 episodes on Friday, when I sit down to outline them is not Friday. And it's not 1 episode and then I record it and 1 episode and then I record it. It is, I batch 4 episodes. It's then I record 4 episodes, or I plan 4 episodes, and then I batch record 4 episodes, and then I batch edit 4 episodes, and then like each task is what I'm batching. I'm batching by work, not by episode. This is really, really valuable. It's really, really important, especially if you are somebody who is completely DIYing your show. It's also, if you're somebody who's DIYing your show right now, it will still be true even once you hand it off. For my clients, we sit down and we do our content planning once a quarter. We plan the whole upcoming quarter. And then I have different clients who batch in different ways. But they generally go and batch all their sort of scripting and prepping for those first 3 or 4 episodes that are going to come out. And then they start recording. Find what works for you at whatever level of support you have. But the more of your show you manage, the more important it's going to be that you are batching by task and not episode. All right? As we wrap up, don't forget that this is about doing something. You're not just listening to me and getting great ideas. I want you to actually sit down and look at your show. Audit your last 3 episodes. And audit your process as you start recording your next 3 episodes. Talked about time tracking. Do it. Just do it. Just get an understanding of how long this is actually taking. If you decide to hand it off, it'll help you understand the value of the time you're buying back. But also, it'll tell you where you need to adjust your process to make things a little easier on you. All right. So audit your last 3 and like make sure everything is there as far as like what's happening from your output. But as you do your next 3, be auditing what's happening as it's happening. If as you do this time tracking, you're like, yeah, it's time to hand off production. Cool. Let's have a conversation. We have some availability for new production clients starting to work with us now. If you are interested in taking one of those spots, I would love to talk to you. uncommonlymore.com/podcast production is where you learn more about what happens in podcast production, the cost, etc. But most importantly is where you book a call with me. Let's have a chat. Let's talk about if this is the right time for you to start handing off some of that stuff that is eating your time. All right? Thank you for celebrating another podcast housekeeping series year with me. This has been so fun. I can't wait to do it again with you next year. I will see you right back here next week for a brand new non-podcast housekeeping episode. I'll see you there. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.